Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Sales Scoop. This is a live show for the leaders and senior executives of UK tech businesses looking to improve how they sell. My name is Alistair Cole. I'm a computer scientist and AI graduate with 2 decades experience in sales, marketing, and product development. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Alan Furley. Hello, Alan.
Hey, Alistair, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well today. First show for us for 2026. So Alan, you run technology recruitment business ISL Talent, and I know, having bumped into you at Sifted Summit and through following you online, that you are a serious player in the UK tech scene, finding, recruiting and embedding the highest quality talent for tech startups who want to scale. And I'm sure during your near 18 years at the helm of award-winning consultancy ISL Talent, you've seen it all. Welcome to the show. I'd love to hear how you're doing today, how things are going with ISL Talent, and how you're starting 2026.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for inviting me along, Alistair. And I suppose, it's appropriate as we hit the first couple of weeks of 2026. The theme's paying it forward. Everybody's very much looking at the year ahead and thinking about all these amazing plans, and I'm full of them myself. I think the last few years, anybody running a business, has realised that it's up and down, and of course, best laid plans soon change. You need to adapt to be flexible, but I think a big part of how we've built the business we have is about having those foundations, and that kind of relationship building, paying it forward, is a key part of it that we've talked a little bit about, and I'd love to share more about today, as well as talking about hiring and the whole world of team and talent.
Yeah, well, when we bumped into each other at Sifted Summit and had a chat about the show and about a potential topic, paying it forward was something that came right out of you pretty quickly, and so it's obvious that it's something that's of importance to you. And I noticed on your website that you talk about what we care about, and one of the big 6 that you've got on your pretty much early doors on the kind of homepage is the long haul, right? We're not about one-off transaction encounters. Partnership is our bag. So there's no surprise that paying it forward and that kind of long-term planning was a topic suggested by you. Before we get into that, I watched you on your 4 realities of startup hiring in 2025. I thought it was a fascinating dive into the commercials behind these hires, what's happening with AI, and the new hiring process, and the fact that roles need to bring more gravitas. Can you summarize for our audience, for those UK startup founders and leaders, what's your view on how 2025 went for recruitment in startups, and what does 2026 look like to you?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So AI, of course, is one of them, which I'll jump back into. I think the underlying narrative behind a lot of startup hiring is it's leaner, and there's partly an AI aspect to that, partly an economic aspect. I think it's also more commercially driven. So we, as a recruitment firm, typically partner with startups and scale-ups that are between 10 and 50 employees. So they're likely to have got their first seed round institutional funding, maybe 1 to 5 million, or maybe we're talking to them at the Series A point, where they're looking to seriously scale and add sort of 10 or 15 heads over the next 12 months. But I think across any of those segments, which are the ones that I'm closest to, previously on a pitch deck 3 years ago, you might have seen headcount put on as a success metric, whereas now the narrative is we're going to need to grow and grow our team, but we're going to be much more intentional around it. Every hire is going to be a bigger percentage of the workforce, because we're going to be not in our world of abundant hiring where fuel was being pulled on the fire of headcount 3 years ago. It's much more a little bit of caution, but definitely looking to move forward and knowing they need people to do that, and making sure that we do really think a bit more about these hires, and not so that people didn't do that before, but actually what is the role we need, and where our business, our future of work is changing ever more so, and AI is a bit of influence on that. How do we make sure we find the people now that aren't just right for today, but will be able to grow and adapt as the business itself course grows and adapts in the future. And I think that's a really key point we see with a lot of the founders we work with, a lot of the investors that we partner with, is actually this needs to be a hire that's going to grow with the business rather than be good for a certain period of time and then have to replace that person and go through all the pain and hardship of that.
Yeah, I mean that it must be fascinating for you to be there at the coalface, because given the arrival of AI and the pace of change now, I would expect that, person you put into a role, on 1st of January this year, that what they're doing and their expected skill set, I would imagine, would be vastly different in 12 months, much quicker change. So is that affecting the kinds of roles you're helping startups close? Are they expecting the moon on a stick from candidates now because there are fewer they're placing and they're expecting them all to be kind of demigods? How's it affected what they're looking for and the process?
Yeah, I think, hey, every founder always wants, as much as possible, don't they, for as little as possible, and that's fair enough. I think we probably see, broadly speaking, 3 buckets. So there are roles that we are seeing a lot less of because of the pace of change, and AI and automation is a big part of that. Definitely an impact on the junior roles that can easily be automated or that AI is clearly able to do effectively, whether it's creating marketing content, graphics, or even doing some sort of junior coding tasks. There's roles that probably you'll see disappear over time. I think there are roles at the other end, whether it's an AI ethics officer or other roles that maybe we haven't even thought of right now, that will emerge and that we'll look back on in 5 years' time and say, hey, I never knew I needed one of these. I think the biggest is the bucket in the middle, which is what most of us are doing right now. And these are the roles that are going to be fundamentally, I believe, changed through artificial intelligence. But you'll probably end up calling them the same, but underneath the surface, what you're doing probably looks quite different. And therefore, the things you're looking for in terms of attributes, behaviors, competencies do need to change and evolve, rather than assuming that what you hired for 12 months ago is going to be fit for purpose today. I think one of the challenges as an individual candidate is, how do I demonstrate that I can cope with that pace of change, and how do I adapt to that? I think there's also a question over, if you're in a job at the moment, whose job is it to embrace technology and AI? Is it yours as an individual? Is it your employer? Is it the states and the government, particularly at the junior level? So I think that's something that's always been a question, but will become ever more important now. But I think in reality, for most candidates today, or most founders, if you're not thinking about how this role is going to evolve or how your career is going to evolve through the use of AI, you're probably missing a trick, I'd say.
Yeah, and that ability to kind of cast towards the future and think about what's coming, that's really at the heart of paying it forward, right? As a new business and a growth practice, and it's something we're doing now, right? To a certain degree, there's no commercial value attached to us getting together or you sharing your highly valuable time. So we're on the same bench there. How is this? Tell me about the backstory of how kind of paying it forward started. Was it something you've always done, or was it something you started at ISL when you co-founded the company, or is it something you've brought in more recently?
I think it's there's no one overnight kind of epiphany of waking up and saying, hey, this is a journey I want to go on. So it's been very much a gradual thing. And if I think right back into my first job in sales, it was very transactional. It was selling advertising and conference sponsorship and to IT companies looking to target South America. And it was old school boiler room, make 300 calls a day, super transactional. And one of the reasons I got into recruitment is because I wanted something that was a bit more relationship focused and had more of a human element. And I did get that to begin with, but I think it's really been a part of ISL over the last few years, realizing that there is a game to be played around going through volumes of approaches, hitting out loads of emails, etc. And that just wasn't really a game that we were enjoying playing, or that really we thought was where the value was to be given and also to received. So it's tied into shifting as a business, a rebrand, talking about partnerships as a way to articulate the way we work with businesses, which is typically in a retained basis, a lot more commitment. And then in a way sort of feeding into that, but also aligning with that, this focus on, well, let's build these long-term relationships where we may not get the immediate payoff, but we are adding value, we are being helpful, not randomly, with intent, and with a view that this is something that will really compound in the longer term, and that we'll look back on, if we're patient enough, to see the value from, for sure.
Yeah. And so from a practical point of view, what are you and the rest of the ISL team doing, today or this year? What does it look like from a practical point of view? Is everything kind of got a link back to paying it forward, or do you have kind of monthly events that are about how does it work on a day-to-day basis for you?
Yeah, I think the philosophy, if you spoke to my team, would be, well, how can we add value to this person without necessarily needing to see, a pound coming back at the end of the day or the end of the week? I think there's a danger with that you end up just randomly going out and and doing favors for people, and it never really ends up being strategic. So we're much clearer in terms of who our ideal customer persona, or ICP, is, and seed Series A founders in technology-driven businesses, and we're also looking to develop relationships with VCs that that play in that field as well. So really, if we're doing something that's adding value, it should be for one of those two groups. For example, I'm doing a workshop in London this Friday for a VC. Now, I'm getting in front of 6 founders and talking about hiring. So it's a chance, of course, to show that I've got some credibility, to facilitate a conversation, and hopefully I'll end up, working with some of those businesses. But it's not jumping in with a, hey, I'm going to sell to you mindset from the outset. And I think if you looked at, this morning in Bristol, I ran a roundtable for deep tech scale-ups. And that is an event that I've got some clients there. I've got some people that I would probably classify as prospects, but it's about creating an environment where people may buy, but I'm not selling to them. And if they walked away at 11 o'clock this morning, they would have said that was a really valuable use of my time of 2 hours, because I've given them a safe space to come into where they can, in this occasion, connect with peers that are building in a similar space and learn and move forward. Sometimes it might be we're doing stuff really early, like talking to a university about helping some of their entrepreneurs that are students think about forming a business. Now, in reality, that's probably got less commercial value. I'm doing that because I enjoy it. But fundamentally, that thread going through is, are we adding value in a way that aligns with our sweet spot, isn't too distant? And if we do it in the right way with our ICP, can we be confident we will see the return in the medium term without needing to be too transactional in our approach?
Okay, thank you. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I think there's even value in, you talked about the university thing, not necessarily it being more of maybe a personal preference, but I feel like even those kinds of efforts bring value, right? Because psychologically you feel good about adding value to others. It gives us some happiness in the workplace, and other people see it and they see the kind of character you are. So how else, those are a couple of examples. Have you got any, how else do you think it's kind of it reflects back in a positive way? And what other kinds of, are there any other things that you share other than your time and facilitation? How do you use insights or thought leadership or personalized assets? Well, what other things do you put out there, and what does that kind of get back, and how does that reflect back positively on you and ISL?
Yeah, I guess one of the things I just noticed, actually, the mug I'm drinking from is a Dent mug. And so if anybody's familiar with Daniel Priestley, he runs a program called Key Person of Influence, which I did a few years ago. I've been fortunate enough to meet loads of people, and even headed off on a skiing trip with them not so long ago with a super fascinating group of entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I think ties that world together with ISL is the belief of being this, KPI is all about key person of influence, which isn't the horrible sort of icky influencer that I would probably think of in some ways, but more around building that reputation and building a brand, whether it's personal or company, to be someone that is front of mind as and when that potential customer has a need. So I think you're exactly right with the university thing. It may be sometimes you're doing something where it's a lot further away from the ideal outcome, and you do need to avoid just doing 20 different things randomly and crossing your fingers, but also be comfortable that it needs a moment of serendipity. And it's about increasing your surface area of luck in a way through having a system of, paying it forward or running events, whatever it may be, so that you are in the right place at the right time. Yeah, and I think that I can definitely think of, I remember a conversation I had with someone who had was doing a maternity cover for a role at Tech Nation a few years ago. He reached out because he wanted to find some good connections in the Southwest ecosystem, and had seen me on LinkedIn, however it was, someone had mentioned my name. I had a conversation with him, didn't really think too much of it. Fast forward 9 months down the line, he's introduced me to a founder that needs some help on a potential hire. They didn't have any money at the time, so I gave them some advice, gave them some feedback on their job spec, how they would go about looking for that person. Go forward another 9 months, that founder came back to me and she was looking for a chief technology officer, had just taken a decent investment round, so had money to pay it. And when I was talking to her as part of our sales process, a standard question, who else are you looking at? Yep. She looked at me like I was a bit stupid and was like, well, Alan, you referred to me to begin with. You gave me some great advice. You helped and supported me 9 months ago without a promise there in the future. You've talked to me about your credibility in this space. Why would I talk to anybody else? Now, not every random conversation, helping someone land an ecosystem turns out like that. But when it does, bloody hell, does it feel good, and you can see the value in doing more and more of this, because it, in effect, it doesn't feel like a sales process. It just feels like a natural continuation of a journey.
I mean, that isn't really a sales process, is it? You'd never sit down, you as we've both worked a lot in sales, you never sit down and kind of map that out really as a kind of desired buyer journey, because, sales director would say it's way too slow and it's too high touch. But I think you touched on something big there, that it feels good. And from my point of view, actually, the paying it forward, it's irrelevant really whether it comes back, because you want it to, but you have to assume that it's not going to happen, and you've got to be doing it for the right reason. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And then how do you stop yourself, or what advice would you give to anybody who maybe has had some success and thinks about investing all of their time into that? How do you stop it becoming a distraction? How do you limit it?
I think it is important to set boundaries. So if I said, yes, I've got this philosophy of paying it forward, being helpful, adding value to people, and you look at my LinkedIn inbox where I maybe get 20, 30 candidates a week reaching out to me saying, I'm looking for a new role, can you help me? Can we have a conversation? People at exec level, if I was to have a 30-minute conversation with all of those, my diary quickly gets filled up for the week, and I could be busy, but probably a busy fool without really getting the value. So I think you do need to set boundaries, and each person will be able to work out, where their lines are in terms of how close someone is to being a prospect, how much they're part of that broader ecosystem, or how much they're ICP. So I've got my own boundaries that I've evolved. I think the other thing is that you can't just I agree with what you're saying in terms of doing something you enjoy is really important to keep with that day-to-day motivation, but I don't think you can, whether it's around career choices or adopting this relationship building approach, I don't think you can do it blindly, and have sort of naive aspirations that, hey, if I do it for long enough it will work out. I think one of the things that we definitely realized is that it was going to take time, and perhaps more time than we thought, but we could start to measure things along the way. As with any sales process, what are the leading indicators and what are the lagging indicators? And also we started off doing, if we're looking at one of the ways in which this manifests itself for ISL Talent, we do founder lunches, typically a couple a month for founders in climate, health, fintech, etc. And that was working well in terms of getting people into the room and having really positive, warm conversations, being able to make an introduction to an investor or give someone a bit of guidance or advice. But we were a bit nervous around the payoff time. Now, we could have stuck with that blindly. What we did is carried on with that, but also started to experiment, running more curated events with maybe thought leadership, talking to, just in the October time, I had 7 CTOs that had all raised 1 to 10 million, get together in London AI Hub and talk about the challenges from a people and technology perspective on scaling. Now, that definitely attracted people we hadn't done before, got a different group of people into the room, and perhaps gave us a chance to demonstrate our credibility rather than simply buy someone a free lunch and cross our fingers that it would work. So as with any strategy, we've We've evolved it. We talk as a team every 3 months. What have we done in the last 3 months? What's been good? What's been bad? What do we need to do differently? And then make sure we're reviewing things. And we could have moved quicker in some ways in different directions, but of course that's really helped to make sure that we're on track and recalibrating to get something that is a system designed to give us the outcomes we're looking to drive.
Yeah, and interesting there, you know, that's kind of the third or fourth like in-person roundtable kind of in-person networking event that you've talked about. So obviously, and having knowing your business and seeing how you talk about yourselves on the website, very much about, you know, the human element, which is, you know, I think getting increasing importance as AI arrives. It's great under the surface, but it's making those human connections even more important, more valuable. Are you doing what else are you bringing? Are you bringing digital kind of sales techniques and digital marketing as well to the party? Is it a mix, or are you very much focused on you know, in-person, real world connections and relationships?
We're definitely bringing in that digital, you know, touch point and sort of, you know, and tactics. It's no doubt an area we, I think, could improve in. You know, what I don't want us to do is to be blasting out 1,000 emails a week to try and sort of cover the numbers in that respect. But there is, I think I'm personally very guilty of thinking, I'll bring some good people together, I'll show my face, I'll smile, and when they need to hire, they'll come to me and say, Alan, you're the only one I want to work with. You know,
Yeah.
and that might be 6 or 9 months, particularly if they're embarking on a funding round to unlock the resources to hire. There's often quite a long lead time.
Yeah.
So where we've used the digital stuff is partly, you know, I'm running a LinkedIn Live myself next week on, you know, what's going to be different around hiring this year and how founders need to set up success. Previously, we've had those two worlds as quite separate. So we're doing more joining the dots. We bought a new CRM system 18 months ago because it helped us to properly segment people and keep in touch with people without them being that invasive, intrusive email that I'm sure we've got, you know, plenty of sitting in our jump inbox, which is just, you know, sell every day. So I think that balance between the in-person stuff, which is really high quality, but then having something that does scale digitally and aligning those two worlds is a journey we're still on, but definitely one of the improvements that we've made in the last 12 months.
Okay, thanks. Well, I look forward to seeing the next LinkedIn Live that you're running. You know, I think what you talked about earlier was not just having pay it forward as the sole kind of effort, actually having lots of different efforts and lots of different work streams going. I think that's that's so crucial, because, you know, people who meet you in person, they are going to go and look at, you know, LinkedIn posts from the company. They are going to go and look at events. So those other things become, you know, kind of guarantees that you've got expertise. But I'm not surprised that lady wasn't talking to anyone else, because I think the most powerful thing is you know, the human to human connection. You know, moving away from paying it forward now, because that's really helpful. Thank you. You've given us some practical examples and what not to do, and the kind of philosophy behind it. You know, leaders and founders of tech businesses who are watching this live or watching it back, you know, if they're thinking about scaling this year, what would be your advice to them about when's the right time to think about, you know, hiring internally rather than using external partners? When should that change? Because a lot of startups, you know, begin by adding resource through partnerships, and then they realize they need to make that switch into getting, you know, is that something that is what would be your advice to them?
I think a lot of the businesses we work with are, excuse me, they're going through venture funding, so they're going to be raising a round, and that is going to be all consuming, you know, that fundraising process that I've seen plenty of founders I know go through. I think the danger can be, you know, say you're raising a 5 million round, you know, you're going to make 10 hires as a result of that, is to see them as two discrete exercises. So I'll raise the round and then I'll think about hiring, or I'll raise the round and then I'll think about whether I've got the people I need at the moment or whether I need to bring them in, because it's definitely not always about just hiring to solve a problem. The founders that either I've worked with or that I've seen go about this, I think, in the most effective way, do definitely think about the team element as part of the fundraising process. So whether that's making sure in the iteration of their latest pitch deck, they've got a robust team slide that shows the people that might be there now and in the future, whether it's the thinking behind it when they're challenged by an investor as to where you need to bring this deep tech technology to manufacturer, how are you going to do that through your people and team? And they've got an understanding of the roles they need to hire, the people they're looking for, and how they measure the success. I think it can make a real big impact on your ability to raise the funding and therefore have the resources to hire. I've definitely seen founders come to us before and they say, right, my chair told me I need a chief technology officer. And if you ask them, okay, well, what is it you're looking to achieve? Those last 4 conversations I've had on chief technology officers, the answer, if I said, what does good look like in 18 months' time, is going to be very different across those 4 conversations, even if they're all in theory hiring for the same title. So I think a big part of where people need to think about it and think about things for internal and external talent this year is what are the outcomes I'm looking to drive. And it may well be you need to hire a permanent person with a VP of engineering title, and you're going to need to pay £120,000 for that. Maybe you've got someone in your existing team. Maybe you could hire a fractional leader who can help you with the strategic expertise and also with the upskilling. Maybe it's outsourcing it. That CTO roundtable I mentioned, one of the CTOs there said he now thinks about where can technology solve this problem that previously he would have defaulted to people on. So I think it's very much about thinking about the problem you're looking to solve or the outcomes you're looking to drive, what the options are. I do find a lot of founders, particularly first-time founders, where they're going to be hiring for roles they've never hired for before, never done before. They've got quite a lot of blind spots, and that's definitely where we're often introduced, is to help fill in the gaps, whether it's around salary benchmarking or what you might call this person, or how likely you are to be pair these two skets together and still find a reasonable talent pool, or where you go out and find these people. I think there's a lot to it that people don't often understand until they start to move through a process. And if it's at the point where they need that person to start in 6 weeks' time, and that's the only time they're really starting to match their internal talent and need and the external market, it's probably too late.
Yeah, CTO is more than a box on a slide, right? With the three letters. There's so much more than that. You talked about senior roles there, and that makes perfect sense, especially as, like you said, there's a kind of bigger focus on that as more junior roles being subsumed into businesses in different ways. What are the kind of classic mistakes or bear traps that founders, especially first-time founders, have when they're recruiting, the first few senior hires? What are the biggest mistakes that startups make?
So I think there's definitely that, not thinking about the outcomes of the role that I touched on originally. Let's assume you do that. The second thing often is, hiring on things that don't really matter. So hiring someone because they worked at Meta or Amazon previously, and giving yourself a lot of false confidence because they've got some nice, big, impressive logos on their CV, whereas the context that your business is in is very different than the journey that they would have been on with that nice, big name. So I think, risking bias by hiring on experience, whether it's years of experience, where they've worked, their job title, is a trap that people fall into. As much as I do feel that founders should trust their gut, then sitting down with someone and saying, hey, I could enjoy watching the football with this person and thinking they'll do a good job. So not having proper objective measures of assessing somebody. It doesn't need to be a 3-page scorecard, but just something where you've worked out what it is you're looking for. Can this person demonstrate that? And then the final thing is, often people do all the good work up front, make the hire. 6 weeks later, this person starts. 6 months later, they have a probation, and you say, thumb up or thumb down. You've not joined the dots along those way. So setting expectations is super important, particularly when it's, a big expensive hire coming into a team that might have been static for a while. How can you help with that onboarding and expectation management to make sure you calibrate and deal with the inevitable sort of bumps along the way and set that person up for success?
Well, that's super helpful. Thank you. Those last few minutes around some of the challenges that startups are going to face hiring in 2026. It's all moving so fast. So thank you very much for that. If anybody wants to reach out and make contact with you, what's the best way, Alan?
LinkedIn is where, rightly or wrongly, I spend a fair bit of my time. So yeah, please drop me a message on LinkedIn, look out for some of the content I'd share there. And I'd love to help people think through their team plans if that's on their mind for 2026.
Great. So hit Alan up on LinkedIn. You can also head over to the isltalent.com website and read more about Alan and his philosophy on hiring and what the rest of his team is doing, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Alan. That was really a great way for us to kick off 2026.
Yeah, brilliant. I look forward to seeing what else is in store for you this year.
Thank you. If anybody watching or listening is keen to see other episodes, you can head over to thesalescoop.com. Today was our 51st live show, so thanks for helping us start on the next 50, Alan, as we progress towards 100. That's it. So thanks very much for your time, Alan. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again soon.